All right, before we get started today, I want to make sure everyone stays tuned until after the episode. We're going to be playing a trailer from Murphy Season 1. This is a project that's coming to us in part by our friend Dennis Mowers, who's done the music for the podcast and has been a guest. This is a new horror mystery audio drama, and it's set to premiere later this year, so stay tuned until the end of the episode for a sneak peek for that trailer.
All right. Thanks for being here, everyone. Today we have an awesome guest, Jake, and we are going to be talking about a book that is a book, Revan.
That's right. Yeah, you might have thought, listening to the Old Republic podcast, that Revan, the novel, was something we should have talked about a long time ago, and you might be onto something, but really what it was is we were just waiting for the right time and the right guest.
Yeah. And we have an awesome guest. Jake, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I was very, very lucky to be that lucky guest to talk about this book. Hey, what's up? My name's Jake. Huge fan of Star Wars.
Yeah, so how did you discover Star Wars, and eventually, how did you discover Knights of the Old Republic?
Well, Star Wars is something I grew up with. I was pretty much like every kid in the 2000s. I grew up with the prequels. I originally thought those came out first because I was tricked by the numbers and whatnot. And then when I got older, I found out about the original trilogy. My whole love for it just expanded. I didn't really think negatively at first. I just wanted to know more. And eventually that led to KOTOR.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how different people first kind of hear about Star Wars and then kind of get into it. Because I kind of discovered it through a toy that I thought was a Polly Pocket, but it was stormtroopers fighting Ewoks, and I was like, why are these bears fighting skeletons and robots are there? I did not understand it. And then when I saw Return of the Jedi all those years later, I was like, oh, that's what that Polly Pocket was, and
a lot of folks dog on the Polly Pocket, but you know what? No, I don't care. I still love all the stuff from Jedi, including the Ewoks.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love the Ewoks? And I think they're fun, and they're a good metaphor for a lot of different concepts and everything. But yeah, the Revan novel, it's funny because I've loved KOTOR basically since I first heard about it. And I was always wanting a novel about Revan, and then the Revan novel came out, and I was just I don't think this is what I was waiting for. And we're 130 plus episodes into the Old Republic podcast, and we haven't talked about it yet, but we're finally getting to it, What's some of the background information on this book, Brian?
Yeah, so when we were going to have Jake on, we asked what topic should we cover, and he brought up this book. Now, I'd read it a couple of times, but Cassia, you were new to it. But this book, it came out in 2011, so quite a while ago. Drew Karpyshyn wrote it, and at the time, I think he was transitioning into the BioWare team that was going to be doing SWTOR. So they had kind of this run-up of Old Republic novels kind of leading into SWTOR. So this came out, I want to say, in November of 2011, and then SWTOR started, I think, that next month. So this was really kind of to set up what we were going to see out of Revan and these characters going into the SWTOR world to kind of build that bridge. Now, this came out in 2011, and I wasn't doing a lot of things in the Star Wars fandom just at that time in my life, so I completely missed this when it first came out. I probably didn't read it until 2014, 2015, and as you know, if you listen to the podcast, we're not big into the SWTOR world, so this was largely off of my radar. But what about you, Jake? You brought this novel up to us. Was this something that you had your eye on back in 2011 when it came out, or was it something you picked up later like I did, or just recently, or what was your kind of history with this novel?
It actually wasn't back when it came out. It was more recently. I'd only really started getting into KOTOR deeply around like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was around that time that the novel just kind of popped up, and it was at that time that I read it, and I didn't really like it too much, and then thinking that you guys hadn't covered it, I was like, oh well, this would be a good time to refresh my memory on it, maybe come at it at a more unbiased perspective. But if you are a fan of just the greater context of Star Wars, this is probably one of the worst books that led up to SWTOR. There are a lot of them, and this is honestly one of the lower tier ones, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I think there were 7 like lead-in novels, like starting from 2010 and up through 2012, and you had some good authors in there: Robert Chesney, Paul S. Kemp, Sean Williams, Alexander Freed, and then Drew Karpyshyn wrote 2 of these books. But yeah, kind of set it up. I think, and we're gonna talk about the book a little bit more in depth. I think that if you kind of came into this world in SWTOR, you probably like this book better than if you came at it from KOTOR. Just kind of the way in the story was structured, and what you kind of wanted to get out of it, I think probably varies. But what about you, Cassia? 2011, you didn't read it then. I think you are a very recent first read on this one.
I literally finished it today. I may have used the Force on an audiobook to kind of make the words go a little bit faster, but I did give it a fair shake. I did finish it from the beginning to last, and I don't know, it's just like, because I loved KOTOR so much, like KOTOR 1 and then KOTOR 2, and then it was kind of just like dead silence. Everyone wanted a KOTOR 3, and like sometimes people are like, oh, are we going to get KOTOR 3? There's a big announcement coming. Then it's like, oh, the Force Unleashed. Force Unleashed is cool, and then it's like a new announcement's coming. We have the creatives from KOTOR working at BioWare, and it's like, oh, is it going to be a KOTOR 3? And then it's like, it's SWTOR. I'm like, that's still cool. The Deceived trailer, amazing, 10 for 10. I think it's the best video game trailer I've ever seen out of Star Wars, and like maybe even just like all of video games, honestly. But when the Revan novel was announced, I think I saw it announced like on the ForceNet. They're still around, and I read the review, and they're kind of like, it's called Revan. It's mostly about Scourge, and if you kind of like are reading it for Revan and like the characters you love from like KOTOR 1 and 2, they're kind of not in it as much, So I was like, what I was kind of wanting was like I guess I've always been on the train like adapt KOTOR, yeah. And then it's kind of like you got the Revan novel, and it's like, not quite my thing. I don't want to read that. I'm not going to read it. Like, there's a whole lot of other Star Wars stuff for me to be excited about. I don't need to get this Revan novel. And then when we were going to like cover it on the podcast, I was like, I think I got to buckle up and be a big girl and just read this Revan novel,
That's right.
Which is honestly kind of funny, because going back to what you mentioned before about the Old Republic trailers, is that the center of the attention in all of those trailers is the Sith Lord Darth Malgus, who I mean, even the most recent one, like he's pretty much the one that everybody talks about. So to have this book be labeled Old Republic and be attached to that property, it's already kind of weird for folks who have seen the trailer. And they're getting into this story, and they're like, "Whoa, what does this kind of have to do with the trailers I watched or whatnot?"
Yeah, for sure. And then I think the Darth Malgus novel also came out in 2011. That first one, Deceived by Paul S. Kemp. So yeah, it's kind of, I guess it was setting up Malgus as kind of this key part of SWTOR. But this book was really a way to give some sort of reason for Revan to still be alive and to be able to, play at least some part into the game. And that's interesting. And you have to go out on a little bit of a limb to kind of connect it through. But that being said, I still think that the book is fun, but I don't know if it handles our characters that well. So let's talk about the book a little bit here. So we meet Revan. I believe it's set kind of in the aftermath of KOTOR 1, and then it does like a time jump to after KOTOR 2. I think, but we see Revan and Bastila are together, which is something that we've always wanted, but bad news for Revan. He's still having some memory issues, which isn't good. He does one of my kind of favorite parts of the book is actually this first part, because we start to get a lot of interactions with Canderous as he's trying to piece his kind of memories back together, very reminiscent of what we just spent, all this time in the first KOTOR with him. But Cassia, how did you like how we got this thing set up kind of, in this regular world kind of for Revan before he gets set off on his adventure?
I would say I probably have a different interpretation of the world of KOTOR and the characters of KOTOR, ironically, than the guy who literally wrote KOTOR. So like, I kind of read this a bit like a fan fiction. I was like, this is fun. It's entertaining. It's written in great prose. The action scenes are great. But I kind of don't quite see this one-to-one like the author does, but I can respect it, know? Yeah. But, I mean, it kind of starts, like, as average as, like, Bastila and Jedi Revan, on Coruscant as they really can. I think it set it up well.
Yeah, I like Canderous as, like, the buddy type of a figure. And one of the things is, like, as they go through and they're getting ready to leave, like, they just rattle off the names of all of the other characters from KOTOR and why they can't be involved in this story, which I think is pretty fun. But Jake, what about you? Do you like kind of the way that this gets set up with Bastila and Revan and, meeting up with Canderous before they head off to, find the Mandalorians and try to piece Revan's brain back together, I guess?
Well, but before we can get to the setup, like, I do agree with you. It was a very, very funny, like, way of just listing all the characters. And it almost felt like Drew Karpyshyn was talking directly to us, where he was just talking straight up to the fans of the first game, saying, like, okay, I know you like these characters, but I'm sorry, we really can't have them in here. Mm-hmm. It just won't fit the story I'm telling, and you just kind of have to deal with it. But other than that, yeah. I do like the setting otherwise, and I like how the Jedi Council, there's little kind of sentences that set up their sort of relationship with Revan at this point. Like, everybody, like the public kind of respects him, as the hero and whatnot, but the Jedi themselves, a lot of them are still a little still averse to him and not really a fan of what he did when he was a Sith Lord, and I like that stuff. Mm-hmm. But as far as the setup with Canderous and whatnot for that, I do like how Canderous is written in this, and I pretty much have no problems with that.
Yeah, he's probably kind of the best part, and also you get T3 in there. T3's awesome. He's always just kind of following Revan around. He's like hanging out like underneath of the booth at the cantina that they're at, which is pretty great. One of my big kind of takeaway from this first part though is that Revan and Bastila are together. They're talking. They're spending their lives together here in this part, and then she immediately just gets like shelved for most of the rest of the book. They're like, oh yeah, pregnant, can't go. Sorry, you stay here, and we'll talk about you later.
Pregnant with not Satil Shan.
Yeah, it's like I kind of wonder, like, for as much as SWOTOR is related to KOTOR, if it should have just been like the next generation, they could have called it like KOTOR the next generation. And they could have had, like, baby Jean-Luc Picard, Satil Shan, and...
Star Trek's already coming up.
I know, I'm just kind of kidding, but, yeah, I don't know, because it's kind of, like, a little bit in, like, Star Wars Episode 3, it's like, wait, how do they not know that, like, they're having twins, and, like, all this? I'm like, does, like... female healthcare not exist in Star Wars, like, which is like a technological, like, haven of like all these things, and I was like, I guess not. I guess they didn't have an ultrasound, so they're like, oh, you're pregnant by like, go be pregnant somewhere else. Gross. We cooties. No want that. you know.
You stay locked up here in Coruscant. We don't want anything to do with you.
Part of it's like kind of believable because we just know that he's not really that close with any of the Jedi in particular anyway. So it's not too much of a stretch to think that those two would just spend a lot of time secluded from the Jedi. But I mean, still, like there should have been more to that to sort of explain like what exactly the dynamics are between Revan, Bastila, and the rest of the Council.
Yeah, because it doesn't really get into that too much. Yeah, they just kind of make mention that they're kind of on the outs and they're holding him at arm's length. But
what if, like, rather than just kind of being told, we were shown, and like maybe like Rook could have shown up like, "Hi, I came like all the way from Tatooine just to tell you that I hate you," or something like that. That was kind of more of a Harrison Ford Han Solo, but.
That was great.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know. Like, you could kind of just show that, like, maybe they're like, Revan, we're trying to give you a bone here, and it's like it's a manipulative bone, and it's like Revan can kind of call it, and like Bastila is trying to like. I think at that point she would kind of like be her own person, her own kind of Jedi, but like try to massage some peace, but. I think they would kind of like be their own kind of Order of Jedi.
Yeah, that's true. We got Revan. He's fighting for to learn about what he did, all the bad stuff he did with Malak. He's trying to piece that back together. He thinks that the best way to do that is to go back to the Mandalorian worlds and see if he can find where he hid Mandalore's mask. He thinks that might kind of jog his memory a little bit, so to speak. Canderous decides to go with him, and we get the biggest bombshell of the whole book. Canderous had a wife.
Yeah.
That was never mentioned in KOTOR 2.
Yeah, I mean, that does actually kind of fit Canderous's character. If someone was to have a secret wife, I'd probably be like, Canderous is probably married and kind of just in it for, like, some of the fun stuff, but it's not like I saw him at, like, the point where he's in KOTOR, like, being, like, a faithful husband and father and devoted and all that, so,
right.
I guess, like, I kind of wrote, like, a pro and con list of this novel, and I guess
okay.
I could just say, like, on my list, it's like I wrote women characters frowny face, because it seems like there's not a whole lot of female characters in proportion to, like, the male characters, and, like, most of them are kind of shelved or die. And
we do get Atris before she becomes Atris, I guess.
You know how much I love Atris, so I was kind of like, oh, Canderous has a wife, and then it's like, oh, she dies. Okay. Didn't even want to see her anyways. That was sarcasm, but, like, maybe I could have liked her, but I don't know.
I actually do like her. If we can devote, like, just, like, a little bit of time to that. Like, I actually do like his wife because I understand her completely. Like, she's like, simple in her motives and whatnot, but she's not, like, simplistic. Like, she's well defined in that sense, and that was honestly one of my favorite parts of the book that was focused on Revan, was kind of focused on him sort of maintaining his mystery persona as like, oh, just some random friend of Gando's that's possibly a Jedi, And I like how she kind of pieces it together, and she's shown to be competent and knows like what's really going on here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I do kind of like that section of the book where we're getting a little bit more of Canderous' background and kind of some of the inner workings of the Mandalorian tribe. I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty well done, and they do, I guess they find kind of this relic, but Revan, that still isn't good enough for him. He's off to some other planet. I don't recall the name of it right off the top of my head, but it was basically like the seat of power for the Sith Emperor, and he goes there, and that's when he's met and captured by this new character that we've been introduced to in the book by the name of Scourge, who is kind of like the second in command to a Darth Nihilus, this dark force user, Dark Lord of the Sith Scourge. What about Scourge, Jake? How did you like this character, the way they were written, how they kind of interacted in the story?
Just to set up more of that, like Scourge is basically one of a million Sith Lords that exist on the planet Droma and Kos, which you were talking about before, which is where the Sith Emperor is, and I love everything about Scourge. Like he's initially someone who thinks very highly of himself, and why wouldn't he? He's a Sith Lord. He's on his way to becoming a Darth. He's climbing the ladder, the corporate ladder of Sithhood, I guess, and. So Scourge isn't even an important guest. He's not the guest he thought he was, and he very quickly has to learn sort of how to deal with more than just brute strength.
Yeah, I mean, the novel could have been called Scourge, and maybe it would have been less misleading in some regards. I think Scourge is an interesting character. It's just I was kind of told this was going to be the Revan novel, and I was expecting like a nice ebb and hawk, like KOTOR 1 family, KOTOR 2 family reunion.
That kind of leads into one of our problems with the book, is that its focus feels like it's trying to tell more of a news story, but because it's called Revan, like that other storyline keeps coming in as like a reminder. Even though the book makes Scourge the most interesting part of it, even though he's a new character and we have one that we already care about, which is Revan. And yet Scourge, just whenever he's there, I honestly love it. Like I immediately love everything he says. Like whether he's like being intimidating or getting humbled or a combination of both, I love seeing it. I love reading on.
Yeah, he's a different kind of Sith.
Yeah, I really like the character of Scourge, and I like kind of the way that Karpyshyn, talks about kind of his motivation, and then as we progress through the book and Revan is captured and being held by Scourge, you get kind of these interactions with them, and like how he is kind of trying to explore the Force and try to understand it better through Revan as his prisoner. I thought was pretty interesting. So yeah, maybe it should have been called Scourge, but I do think that Scourge was a really good character, and I like the way that he was incorporated into the story. And then any good prison story is going to need a prison break. So who do you bring in to do that? You bring in the exile. Mitra Surik herself is coming in to hopefully save the day. I guess you just needed to kind of fill out the story to KOTOR 2 to make it make sense. But Cassia, Mitra Surik is back. What do we think about her?
I love Mitra Surik. I kind of got the sense that KOTOR 1, to me, kind of felt a bit like The Force Awakens, and then like KOTOR 2 was kind of like The Last Jedi, and then you kind of have like, this is kind of like as close to KOTOR 3 that we got, and it kind of feels like this is the Rise of Skywalker, where sometimes it feels like some things are undone that the last like KOTOR 2 did, and I kind of just feel like Kreia, the Exile, and her crew weren't given enough respect, and it kind of felt a bit like Karpyshyn was a little bit like, I didn't write it, so like, does anyone care? That's kind of the vibe I got. I'm not trying to be rude or anything. It just kind of like, to me, that's what it kind of read it. But like, it's always great to see Mitra Surik. Mitra Surik, the name has grown on me. I kind of wish.
Me too.
Yeah, I kind of wish they like went with any other face for Mitra Surik, but I guess this is what we got,
Yeah.
And it's always great to see T3. I think T3 is the true hero of the KOTOR series, and in my heart, he lives forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Mitra Surik and Bastila do share some time in this book together. Mitra spends almost as much time with Bastila as Revan does in the book. One of the things I don't really like is that they play like this kind of like jealousy kind of thing, which I don't know that you would get if you were telling this story today. Probably a little bit more empowering for them. But yeah, I think that it's neat that she comes in and she can kind of use her connection to Revan, which seems like something that Bastila probably could have done too, and you could have kept it a little bit more centric around her. But what do you think, Jake? Mitra Surik, pretty cool character. We love her, obviously, in the KOTOR 2 story, but what do you think about her inclusion in this book and kind of the role that she plays within it?
I like the fact that she's included, but it almost feels like Karpyshyn kind of just read her wiki notes and still, for some reason, couldn't include any of them. Because honestly, which once Revan gets kidnapped and there's like a bit of that time skip that happens, he's there for a while. We basically skip like 5 years into the future after the events of KOTOR 2, and those events are really downplayed.
Yeah.
And which I'm not really a fan of, because Mitra Surik is such an instrumental Jedi. She's such a unique one that has used the Force in ways that we really haven't seen before, and none of that is really mentioned whatsoever. She just seems like she could have been just any other Jedi, and I like her personality, but that aspect of her character is missing, and it's missed for all like the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And like you were saying before about like the sort of little jealousy thing, I wouldn't have like minded that if that were like a short story in and of itself and like a comedic sketch or something like on SNL. But as far as being in this book, it just felt like a little bit of padding, and it just didn't need to be there.
I was kind of like, oh yeah, because at this point in her life, like Basila's gonna be jealous of someone that her husband knew years ago and was a good friend, you know, after
Because she needs to be for some reason.
she was married and like had a kid with him, and like he's defending the galaxy for her and their kid, you know, and like Basila wouldn't be jealous. And it's almost just kind of like Mitra's like, oh, I'm not into him, but it's just kind of, I don't know, I have to share him with his wife. And it's like, what? Like, oh.
Yeah, the way it's phrased especially, just it leaves a lot to the imagination.
Yeah. So I was like, kind of like continuing my female character's frowny face. That's kind of another thing that I was kind of like a little cringy when I was listening to it. So.
And it only gets worse, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I guess she does through the kind of this rescue attempt. They are spending some time together in this cave, the three of them, Revan and Scourge and Mitra Surik, and Mitra does have a recording. Well, I guess T3 has it technically, but Mitra comes back with T3, and Revan is getting to see kind of this, kind of hollow recording of Bastila and their child, which I think is pretty nice, and kind of maybe the most sort of like character driven bit we get from Revan throughout the thing. So I kind of like that aspect of the story. I guess I'll give it that there.
Yeah, it was almost like a not a member berry, but it was kind of like what like The Last Jedi did. Like I really like that one scene where R2-D2 just kind of shows Leia's original message in A New Hope to Luke, and Luke's just kind of like, oh, how dare you, sort of thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and it kind of gave me that sort of vibe, but it was a little bit more serious and emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then he just kind of keeps watching it, over and over again, which I think is pretty cool. And then kind of, played against that, you have Scourge is trying to figure out, where in the Force he resides. So I do kind of like that section of the book. So I kind of like that first bit with Canderous, and I like kind of this section when those three characters are spending some time together before they head off to confront the Sith Emperor, I guess, and we lose Revan to the annals of time, and Bastila loses him forever.
We're skipping ahead.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, the Sith Emperor I don't quite understand, because like whenever like I try to like keep up with like SWTOR, I'm like, okay, the Emperor's dead, and then it's like, but he's not dead, and then it's like he died, and then it's like, but he didn't. I was like, oh. Okay.
It's pretty much like the idea of Palpatine returning, like taken to its nth degree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which wouldn't be like too much of a problem if the Emperor himself was interesting in any way. But like for anybody who's played KOTOR 2, he just kind of feels like a ripoff of Darth Nihilus, but way more unsubtle. And to set up his character, he was basically a Sith pureblood, which if you know what they look like, they're basically like red humans with like those little tendrils coming out of them.
They're like lobsters.
But basically lobster people. Yeah, that's what Scourge is. That's what Setchel is, who's Darth Nihilus' one of her aides, and that's what the Emperor was. But he, presumably, like thousands of years ago, he basically gathered a bunch of Sith Lords to sort of conduct like a ritual on this planet called Nathema. And the ritual, essentially, they poured all of their powers into him, and he drained the entire planet of its life. He basically did a Darth Nihilus in the planet, and that's what sort of gave him his power. And now he's immortal. And the book does a good job of illustrating how this has affected him, especially if you listen to the audiobook. They really do a good job with his voice of having the multiple people kind of layered over each other. And that part of him I found interesting, and even the presence he had on Lord Scourge. Drew did a good job with sort of writing how scared he was to even talk to the Emperor in that scene where he's sort of lying to him about what's going on.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the character, but I was like, ooh, he is kind of scary, but also kind of like a ripoff of like Nihilus and Palpatine. I mean, it's hard because like Star Wars, I kind of feel like there's kind of a set kind of like
Poetry
story, like, which can rhyme, but it can also be like, they kind of did this, or like we could get some new stories, but yeah, I don't know, it was interesting. I think the fights were well done. I do think Scourge had an interesting character. I think Revan is kind of held back a bit by like, sometimes it's kind of like, I feel like Star Wars writers just try to make everyone happy, and like sometimes they just kind of keep things as open as possible, and sometimes it's more interesting to make bold decisions and like stick with them rather than just try to like appeal to the widest demographic,
Yes, stick to their ideas all the way through.
Yeah. And Scourge was interesting. I really did not like that Mitra just has to be the one to die. Like, just kind of, if, like, not as many females died and, like, weren't shelved, I could have maybe bought that a little bit better, but it's kind of just like, Mitra's not the awesome dude with the mask. Yeah. So she dies, but she'll always be Revan's good girl buddy, and
which honestly just comes off as such like a surface level understanding of what and who she is. Like she was never tied to Revan in any way. I mean, in her own game, she had so much agency, and she made her own decisions. I mean, she chose to cut herself off from the Force, and she has the most. In a way, she has the most experience with this kind of oddity that the Emperor represents, but she doesn't really. The book doesn't really give her any space to pontificate on it or anything like that. She kind of just becomes a little bit of a background character.
Yeah.
And which is honestly a shame, because everything leading up to those three sort of uniting Mitra, Scourge, and Revan, there are parts of that I really like. Yeah. One being when Revan is like spending all this time in the interrogation room and he's being drugged and he can barely use his Force abilities. One thing I liked was how he was essentially the most vulnerable he'd ever been, and he had to get out of it through his wits and manipulation. And I liked seeing him do that with Scourge. Mm-hmm. But how Mitra has to dress as like a slave girl to
my alarms
sort of
were going off.
Yeah, like the fact that they had to write it that way, like it's such like a like I was reading it and I was like, wait, so she would just agree to subject herself like this? Like you really can't find any other way. Like there are high-ranking imperial women who are literally like the emperor's servants. Like surely you can write something in like that.
Right.
No, Scourge has to demean her in front of Murtaugh and Setchel.
Yeah, and then her death is almost like this kind of throwaway thing. It doesn't really have any sort of effect on the outcome of anything. Just like, oh, she was here, she's dead now. She could have lived, and it wouldn't have affected the SWOTOR timeline like at all. But yeah, I don't know the way that she was handled, and I think there's probably some truth to what you're saying, Cassia, is that she wasn't one of the characters here. So how much energy we're going to put into telling more of her story, and the big point of this book, I guess, really was to figure out a way for Revan to still be alive in 300 years at the time of SWOTOR, so we could use him in stories going forward, I guess. And to that end, success. The book is a success because that's what happens.
I mean, it happens, but in my mind, I'm like, is it a success though? Like,
it is a success on some level at least. So I have here in my notes. So the Revan novel, is this a KOTOR 1.5? Is it KOTOR 3? Is it trying to do both of those things, or is this something completely different? Like, what do you think like the intention of the book was, and where do you think it actually landed? Jake, let's start with you.
Yeah, go with you, Jake.
Thank you. Well, I feel like it was neither, honestly. Like because the KOTOR 1.5 aspect is like kind of there. It's weird because the KOTOR 1.5 aspect would have just been more focused on specifically Canderous becoming Mandalore, and that whole journey. But a lot of the focus is on Scourge and his sort of rise in both his competency and sort of learning all the secrets of the Dark Council, as well as his master Darth Nihilus, who's also a Sith pureblood. And that aspect, I don't think, is there at all really for KOTOR 1.5. And as far as a KOTOR 3, it feels more like a rush past 3, or like a 2.5 if you wish, and more like, okay, we started at 2.5 and now we're at SWOTOR or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if this didn't come across, like, I would have loved, like, a complete trilogy for KOTOR. And maybe they could have had the next generation be the next generation and, like, tie that to SWOTOR. It just seems a little puzzling to have the next story be set 300 years later, but, like, incorporate so many characters like Revan and like do a lot of back breaking and arm twisting to be like, he's alive. It never really happens in stories before that much, but he's there. Don't question it. None of your other favorite characters are here, but we don't care. We have Revan, so Funko Pops,
That's right.
And that also...
Yeah,
sorry, what were you going to say?
Sorry.
Thank you. I was just going to say that also leads into the bigger problem, or the biggest, depending on who you ask, is that this novel, like, honestly really misunderstands Revan and who he was. Like, his actions in both KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 seemed like he was very much, like, competent and in control of himself when he was fighting during the Mandalorian Wars and when he became a Sith. Even though like the characters couldn't we couldn't talk to him like directly through dialogue or whatnot in KOTOR 2, but all of his actions that are presented and what other characters infer are very consistent, and the impression I got from all that is that he was trying to essentially prepare the galaxy when he became a Sith Lord for what Vichy was. And whatnot to sort of fix that. But this book sort of removes any hint of that or any agency from him really at all. I mean, even the book goes so far to make him more sympathetic than interesting, I feel. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but they kind of just remove most of his interesting qualities It goes so far out of its way to make him sympathetic. It just feels so.
It was a Pyrrhic victory, and like he knew what it would do, and the Exile did too. They were trying to win that war by any means necessary. So I kind of felt like this book took away Revan's agency. I think it's a little sloppy to just say, like, oh, Revan and Malak turned to the dark side because they were forced to by a Sith Emperor. I kind of just think it was the war, and I like elements of, like, saying, like, there's some elemental Sith, beyond the borders of space that have cropped up. And we have to confront them or try to negotiate peace, and I don't know, I kind of just like wanted a KOTOR 3, but I got the Revan novel. Maybe they could have a meme like where it's like, I want KOTOR 3, and then it's like, we have KOTOR 3 at home, and it's the Revan novel, but to me the Revan novel feels a bit like a SWTOR prequel DLC, and it just I kind of wanted some more bows tied, like on the KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 characters. Like I wanted a little bit more of a group chat, like more characters to appear, not like that they all have to have an epic hallway scene, but just more interaction, like more humanity,
Right.
I mean, very much so. It very much feels like a book that is very disinterested in talking about its main character, which, if you're a fan of the TV shows, you probably that's probably not the last time you've heard that phrase.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's like the action scenes were good. The prose is good. I can't really complain about it. But it's just like, I know that in history, like some things that happened 300 years ago or even 1,000 years ago still impact us, but it just seems a little weird for me, like in Star Wars, to have a character that's dead, like survive 300 years, no one else does, and maybe that's just a me thing, and I can't get past it, and I'm just too attached to these characters and like, well, like, let other things happen, but like, I don't know, like, I could be down for like a mythic era of like elemental Sith, like mythic Sith to confront, and like there's ups and downs all throughout history, like technologically, belief-wise, and like different stories are told at different times, and that could have been reflected in SWTOR and KOTOR compared to like the Skywalker saga, but I don't think it was quite to that level. But I mean, the Revan novel just set out to be like, Revan lives and SWTOR is going to happen, and Bastila really is happy about it, and it's fine if Mitra dies, like, they're fine. Like, just let go. They're fine.
It's all fine.
It's also funny because, like, Revan also has so little of a role in SWTOR anyway that it makes you question why he even needed to come back.
Yeah.
Or have his life artificially lengthened.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to say is Drew Karpyshyn also wrote one of my favorite Star Wars books, Darth Bane: Path of Destruction, that people widely like. But this one, it sets out to keep Revan alive for 300 years. But this was a weird story to tell to do it. I think it would have made more sense, I think, if you would have just taken all of his characters from KOTOR 1 and just told a story about them, and then had, instead of trying to incorporate pieces of KOTOR 2, like, just completely ignored it. I think it might have worked a little bit better. As far as Revan and SWTOR goes, we'll get more into SWTOR in the future. I actually just got it back on to my computer, so hopefully I can start playing it and learning a little bit more about it. But I think kind of for me, if I was placing Revan in this, is you almost keep him as more of an idea, and that anyone could put that mask on and become Darth Revan,
like Spider-Man.
almost as like this relic kind of a thing. You do that as opposed to keeping him alive for 300 years. And then, kind of the hardest part of the whole book then is you get the little, epilogue with Bastila and the kid. And Bastila's like, yeah, well, I'm old now, Miss Revan.
I have gray hair, and I'm wrinkled. One question, though. Do you think that Bastila, even though she has gray hair, like, would still do, like, these, like, highly intricate, like, hairstyles? Do you think that would be a character trait that kind of follows through her whole life?
Absolutely. It's probably something that Satele picked up from her.
Yeah.
Because she does have different hairstyles in, like, the different trailers, so why not?
Yeah. I mean, like, double-bladed lightsabers, they're genetic. Fancy hairdos, British brunette genetic, so don't question it.
That's right. Just her hair would have went like solid white like Atris, but yeah, it still would have been the same kind of style, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you had a whole list of pros and cons, Cassia. Did we get through enough of the pros and cons talking about this book? I feel like we kind of went through the story. Was there anything else that you thought, or Jake, were there any other parts of the book you definitely wanted to bring up before we put this novel to rest for right now?
Before we bury this novel, there's a lot of little things, just to focus on Scourge. There's a lot of little things that I liked. That one of my favorite fights in the book is when he fights Darth Cedrix, which is somebody that Nyris sort of made him go after, which was another Dark Council member that we originally thought was targeting her, but then we find out that's all a facade. But what I liked about it was that it was less of a fight and just more like a conversation that ended with a fight, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. I really like how Cedric, being this Dark Council member, you think he's like all this, he thinks he's powerful, he's old, he's wise and all that, and Scourge has no chance. But then when Scourge actually listens to Nyris' advice that she gave him earlier in the book, he uses his own anger as well as feeding off the emotions of other people. He sees through Cedrix's frail defenses, and he's like, oh yeah, you're just an old man. And I love little small fights like that, even if they're not too important to the bigger context of the story.
Yeah.
Like you said, Scourge is a really interesting character, and yeah, kind of his interactions there with the different kind of like hands of the Sith there, the Lord that he was serving, I thought were really interesting and really well done. And yeah, I would be up for hearing like more Scourge stories or stories like that, kind of more focused on them, I guess.
Oh yeah, his whole dynamic between him and Setchel and Murtagh are just some of my favorite interactions, because we're learning so much about the Sith, and that, in my opinion, is why, like Cassia said earlier, this should have been just a Scourge novel, because Drew is really, really good at focusing on the Sith, and he knows how to make them interesting. Like, case in point, the Bane trilogy. Like, he really seems to like it, and it seems maybe, from my point of view, that maybe he was sort of forced to make it a Revan novel, purely because, like, maybe the folks at BioWare thought that connecting the biggest selling point of the KOTOR series in this book would just get more folks into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we went through my positives and negatives, and perhaps I was probably the most negative out of, like, all of our podcast episodes, but I was trying to be fair, but explain my opinions. If this is your favorite novel, and we feel like it could be a good conversation, that's great. If you want to maybe pitch some ideas for us to cover or come on, like, we're always game, Like, for me, like, this novel is maybe more 2 out of 5, but like the Bane trilogy, I'm in the middle of it. It's like some peak Star Wars content that is ripe for an adaptation.
Are you on Rule of 2?
I'm on the first one, but I'm in the middle of it. And then, like, I do have Rule of 2. And I believe I did for Star Wars Wookiee Life Day. I think I did give that to Brian one Wookiee Life Day.
You did, absolutely, yeah, because they came out with the new covers. And if you do like the Revan novel, or you're just a collector of the books or collector of KOTOR stuff, which we kind of are, they're actually doing a reissue of it. And funnily enough, we kind of stumbled upon this when Jake brought up the idea of talking about this book. I downloaded it from my library, the audiobook version of it, and it had the new art covers that we're seeing from Del Rey in these re-releases. So we got tipped off that was coming. I haven't seen anything official from Del Rey or not, but it's showing here on Wikipedia that that's due to be released on November the 1st. So I guess keep an eye out for that. I'm sure we'll get some more, updates as we get closer to time, whatever that next wave of those Essential Legends books are going to be. But pretty cool that it's getting back out there. And if you like this book, I mean, that makes sense. It's well written. It's entertaining. I think it just missed on some spots for us, but I could definitely see how you would still be into this book if you like these characters and like the way that it goes. And if you like kind of these stories of the Sith characters, I think that you'll find a lot to like with Scourge in there. But yeah, I think that's kind of a good place to wrap up, unless either of you had anything else that we wanted to throw in about the Revan novel.
I just want to throw in something quickly about Del Rey. Like, speaking of that, all the Legends novels, especially the prominent ones, are getting redones like that, like you just said, and they all actually look great. Even though some of them might seem like they have a wildly different art style to the original, I always prefer the original art, but I am very, very pleased with a lot of these new re-releases. And hey, you know what? I'm happy with them branding it Legends. And it's like, yeah, we know this is what it is, and we're not afraid.
That's right. Get these stories back out there for people that want them, or people that might have misplaced their copies, or they got sold at yard sales and they want to get those back into the collection. That's a good way to do it. So, Cassia, I'm glad we finally covered this novel. We finally got you to read it, learn all about Revan and his 300 years in the wilderness, or on the Sith planet, or whatever he was up to that whole time. Missed a little bit of Bastila. Could have had a dash more Bastila probably, but what are you going to do?
It happens. I do want to say that Drew Karpyshyn is a great writer, has contributed a lot to Star Wars, and he's obviously a talented writer. I love his Bane trilogy. So if I seemed more negative, I don't mean to be, because he's a great writer, contributed so much, obviously.
We're not hating on him personally. Always the writing.
Yeah, and I just didn't personally like the Revan novel, but I like a lot of his other novels. The Darth Bane trilogy, especially, if he ever wants to come on the pod, if he deigns to be on our pod, we would be so thrilled, but...
You'd have some choice words for him.
Oh, I would not. I would keep the choice words to myself. I would just be in awe, because we would just talk about the Darth Bane trilogy.
And then he'd be like, well, what about Revan?
We'll jump straight from that into talking about Mass Effect. But I think that is going to wrap it up for our Darth Revan conversation. The novel. Let us know what you think about the novel and about the characters. Let us know all that stuff. But yeah, thanks for joining us. And Jake, thank you so much for coming on. We've been wanting to get you on for a while now. I'm glad we finally found a topic. So thank you very much for taking some time out of your evening and coming on and chatting with us.
No, Kimmy, thank you very much. So much fun.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening along this time. And Cassia, Revan novel, done.
2 out of 5. May the Force be with you.
There are very little things that scare me nowadays. But I've always been terrified of the water.
Something's got me! Jack!
Good afternoon. I'm Detective Sergeant...
Jack Sherwood. After all these years.
Madeline Murphy?
Jess Murphy, please.
What are you doing here?
Something tells me you think there's more to this investigation.
You were looking for... monsters?
I will warn you, it can get a little dangerous. Creatures even I have yet to encounter.
Can't all be real. Can it? What secrets are below the waves?
Do you trust me?
I haven't seen you in 20 years. Of course I can't trust you.
I'm not gonna let something happen to you. Jack!
What are we diving into?
Monsters, cryptids, the third kind. These creatures are real.
Where do we go now?
Whatever the monsters call, I guess.
Hello, may I ask what this is all about?
It's complicated. Murphy, a new audio drama, coming soon.